Welcome to the Live Free podcast, where we discuss all things neuro wellness, neuro empowerment, and anything that helps you live free. We share modern neuroscience principles in an easy to follow format so that you can remove restrictions holding you back, create an incredibly fulfilling experience, and live free.
Welcome to the Live Free podcast. We're excited you're here. And today we're going to talk about something I think we all struggle with. I know for me, I have a great desire to be consistent with my morning routines, with exercise, and things just kind of happen. And I fall short of what I really, really do want to do. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity to share the neuroscience around staying consistent. Let's start with Bryson giving us a quick review of neuroplasticity.
So neuroplasticity is going to be the key to any sort of change that we want to make, right? And in short, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt and change. So whether that's getting rid of an old pathway that isn't serving us, building a completely new pathway, or even just strengthening an existing one. There are two main ways that neuroplasticity can happen. It can happen from repeated firing, so we're firing the same pathway over and over again, or it can come from emotionally charged experience, so high intensity experiences. Think of PTSD, but at the same time, these sort of changes can happen with really positive experiences. Any life-changing event where you are drastically altered afterwards was due to neuroplastic changes that happened because of an intense emotional experience. So with any of these habit changes that we want to make, we want to get up earlier every day. We want to work out consistently. We want to change how we eat. We want to change the thought patterns in our mind. Any of that, there are going to be neuroplastic changes involved, right? So the key is, well, how do we make that change when we haven't already made it? Because if we haven't made it, then that means we're relying on our old pathways, right?
So once we make a change, how do we make it consistent? How do we get it to stay? How do we get it to be permanent? Or better yet, what goes wrong when we're trying to be consistent?
I think the biggest thing for most people, and at least for me, is that we lose enthusiasm about these changes that we want to make. We get really excited about our New Year's resolutions and we hit the ground running on New Year's Day. And we're usually pretty good for a few weeks until that willpower kind of fades away because we're not as excited about it. Or we just kind of get thrown off. We were really consistent with our diet, and then the holidays came around.
So for me, I get thrown off if I travel or even just have an interruption in my routine from maybe someone visiting or a change in a work schedule.
So those are all ways that our routine and our consistency can get interrupted. But and there's ways that we can address that and kind of have some grace for ourselves and just understand that we're not going to be perfect with our consistency 100% of the time. Even the greatest athletes in the world don't have a perfect training record. But what matters is that they are constantly working on improving that training record. So the thing that we wanted to cover today that I think is going to be relatable for a lot of people and also will adjust how you work on your consistency starting today. One of the biggest reasons why we fail with being consistent is there's this internal dissonance. And when I say dissonance, I mean the dissonance between who we used to be and who we're trying to be now. And if there's, hopefully when we're making these big changes, there should be some dissonance between who we were and who we're trying to be. Otherwise, it's not really a worthwhile change. And we can have small incremental changes, but there's no reason why we can't have these bigger changes. But a lot of people get stuck here because they try making these big changes and it doesn't feel like who they are. And we know that one of the greatest motivators that we have in our life is living up to who we think we are, our own perception of our identity. And whenever we don't believe that we are the person who wakes up early and that works out every day or eats a healthy diet, it's going to be really, really hard to keep doing those things because we don't believe that's the type of person that we are, right? And the last type of roadblock that comes up a lot that I think a lot of people face is commitment. And when I say that, people think, oh, like I'm just not committed enough. My commitment level isn't high enough. But actually, I think the issue is that we are committed too much. And that might just not make any sense at all. You might be thinking, why would I need to be less committed to making these changes? Wouldn't more commitment be the better way to go? If I'm more committed, then I'll be more consistent. And although that is the case a lot of the times, I don't think people realize that they're sabotaging themselves by overcommitting to some of these changes. We'll talk about that later, but for now, just be thinking about where your level of commitment is at. Or would you consider yourself overcommitted or undercommitted to the changes that you're trying to make?
I just have a question about that too, because I think we can feel very committed, but we can doubt our ability to be fully committed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's like a subtlety there. It's like, I've chosen to do this. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, can I really? Do I have what it takes?
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the first of the roadblocks that we wanted to cover today about the dissonance. Obviously, there can be some dissonance in what the type of person that you think you are and what you're trying to do. But I think with that, and this is where it gets into those nuances, not just, am I the type of person that wakes up every day and works out, but also, am I capable of doing that? Am I capable of doing this hard thing every day? Am I capable of staying committed to doing ice bath every morning? Or am I going to wimp out and give up? So yeah, I think the identity plays a huge role in it.
So how do we deal with those roadblocks? I mean, like, first, let's talk about dissonance. What is going on from a neuroscience perspective when we run into dissonance?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, one of the greatest motivators in our life is to live up to who we believe we are. So when we don't see ourselves as successful, as tenacious, committed, diligent, it's super hard to be those things. A lot of people believe that if you fix this by just changing how you see yourself, but where do we get that idea of who we are? I think a lot of it is how we choose to perceive ourselves, but I can't just convince myself that I am, an incredible athlete and dedicated to working out every day if I haven't worked out in the gym a single day in the past 5 years. There's just I can't trick myself into believing that. So yeah, I think we can choose how we perceive ourselves, and we can choose to give ourselves credit where credit is due and to give ourselves grace and understanding for the times that we failed. But that can only go so far. At some point, we really do need to have some sort of evidence for that confidence that we build in ourselves. And that's hard to get because where is that confidence going to come from if we don't have any evidence? So I think a lot of people wait until they have that confidence to change and confidence in their own abilities. But that confidence it can't just be created. We have to take action and we have to have that proof first before we can really rely on that confidence.
How do we get there when we haven't already had a good track record to look back on?
And I think that's what I wanted to get to today, because I think that is the thing, that's the principle that is going to help people the most. Before I get into what this looks like, I want to share a quick story. A few months ago, I realized that I wanted to start waking up earlier. There's just so much that I wanted to do with my mornings, and I recognized that mornings were my most productive time if I turned them into a productive time. But I just had the hardest time waking up earlier, and I kept snoozing. So I decided to wake up at 5:30 a.m. every morning, and then I failed like 5 days in a row. Hit my snooze like 2-3 times. At one point, I turned my alarm clock off and then set a timer on my phone for 45 minutes so that I could have more than a 5 or 10 minute snooze. And then I realized that I kept failing at waking up early because I was experiencing this dissonance. In my mind, I was like, you're not the guy that wakes up at 5:30 every morning. Like, you haven't done that, in years. You can't just start doing that now. Like, you sleep in till 6:37. And I recognized that this was my perception of my identity, and that perception was getting in the way. But then at the same time, I couldn't just ignore that, and I couldn't just convince myself that I was the person that was waking up at 5:30 every day, because I wasn't. I genuinely, authentically wasn't, but I wanted to be. So I implemented what we call the Batman principle. Bruce Wayne, he's just this eccentric billionaire, goes to parties and hosts events and donates tons of money. He is not the type of guy that will go out and just punch bad guys and villains in the face. That's just not who Bruce Wayne is. But when he puts on his mask and his costume as Batman, he shifts into this different persona where suddenly he is the type of person that punches bad guys in the face and even goes toe to toe with some pretty crazy villains. Something that Bruce Wayne would never do, suddenly Batman is doing. And not only is he doing it, but he's doing it really, really well. And that's just who he is. That's just what Batman does. In short, he had found a way to move past that dissonance that he would have felt if he were to try to punch villains as Bruce Wayne, because that's not something that Bruce Wayne would do. By putting on that mask and shifting into this different persona, this persona that he had created of the Batman, he was able to start doing all these things that he wanted to do, until eventually that kind of became his persona. People know who Batman is probably more than they would know who Bruce Wayne is. So I took that same principle and applied it to my life. I'm not saying that we should pretend to be someone that we're not or put on a fake persona, but what I am suggesting is that we can temporarily put on a mask of the person that we want to be until we have enough evidence for our self-perception that we can see ourselves as the person that does that thing.
So what did that look like for you?
So I sat down and I listed a few things that I wanted to be different in my life. I wanted to wake up early. I wanted to have more intense and rigorous exercises and workouts each day. And I wanted to go to bed earlier and stay off my phone in the evening. And in order to shift into the ability to do those things without having that dissonance of that, this isn't what Bryson does, you can't do that, I created what I called July Bryson. So I sat down and I wrote all these things out and I said, yeah, this isn't what I've always done. This isn't even what I've done for the last few months. But July Bryson is different. And July Bryson does wake up early. July Bryson does have really intense workouts. July Bryson eats healthy. July Bryson goes to bed early. And anytime I found myself doubting that I could do these things or coming up with any sort of excuse for why I wasn't going to wake up early or why I should hit snooze on my alarm, I would tell myself, yeah, that's what old Bryson would have done. But July Bryson is different. And right now, we're July Bryson. And it was crazy how well this worked. And soon it kind of just became this automatic reflex that as soon as I found myself coming up with an excuse, I found myself talking not as normal Bryson trying to be July Bryson, but as July Bryson saying, we're no longer that old version. We are now July Bryson, and July Bryson does things differently.
How long did it take for July Bryson to become Bryson? Or is that still kind of a work in process?
I would say that I was able to start doing those things in just a couple of days. Granted, I did sit down and had a very deliberate planning session, and it wasn't just real quickly jot down a few things I want to do and suddenly I'm going to make those changes. I spent probably an hour one evening writing down all those things, planning it out, getting a clear image of of who July Bryson was. But then it was probably almost immediately that I was able to stay consistent with those things. And it took probably about a week before I felt like I was now July Bryson, where it wasn't just me saying that I was becoming this new person and that it was all right that I wasn't acting like I used to be. But it was probably about a week afterwards that I truly felt like I was the new person that was now just waving off those excuses as they came up versus fighting for that persona and fighting for that new self-image that I had.
Because you now had a track record. And so your mind could accept that that's who you were now.
Yeah, exactly. I think it would have been harder to accept that track record if I hadn't also created this new image of who I wanted to be. If I had just brute forced my way through 5 or 6 days, it would have been harder to stay committed to that, even with 5 or 6 days of a track record. But once I had this new image of myself and 5 or 6 days of a track record, it really solidified this new self-perception, which just it led to more exponential growth and change because it had a synergistic effect. It wasn't just, oh, I have some evidence, but this evidence is proof of an actual change, of this new person that I now am.
So your mind, your brain now had something to embrace, a track record, a new persona, and together that created a nice synergy for you.
Yeah, and that makes sense with what we know about neuroscience. With the Live Free program, for example, we don't just go over all these good things that we should do. And here are some good habits that will make you a better person. And here's how to deal with this frustration. That's all good. And you do gain benefit from making those changes and making those shifts. But it's not until we have this vision of who we want to become and the life that we want to live that those changes really move us forward at a faster pace. We need that vision or that destination that we're moving towards, along with the actions that are moving us toward it. Otherwise, what are those changes? Again, like it's just a difference in how we do things. But whenever they are geared towards a specific direction or destination or end goal, suddenly there is more energy and sustenance behind those changes versus, I used to wake up at 6 and now I wake up at 5:30. That doesn't mean anything outside of context. It's like, what's the difference between waking up now and 30 minutes earlier? There is nothing, unless there is some meaning behind that of, I want to be the person who wakes up early and works on myself and invests in myself so that I can have a happy, thriving family and a growing business. Now, all of a sudden, waking up 30 minutes earlier means something because there's purpose behind it and there's sustenance behind that change. And I think that's why implementing that Batman principle of, I'm not just going to make some changes, but I am now a new person, and this new person makes these changes because this is how they do things. So obviously, I need to shift how I do things because that's how the old Bryson did things. The new Bryson does things this way. And I think that not only does that lead to more progress and growth, but it's also so much easier because there's more power and motivation and meaning behind those changes and behind the actions themselves.
I love that. Thank you. So we've talked about the dissonance and an incredible way to move past that dissonance. And you mentioned earlier also being committed to changes, how you commit to change can be a roadblock. So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of people think that they are not committed enough to their changes. And there is something to that. I think there is certainly a threshold of commitment that you need to hit to overcome any resistance. And often with any sort of change that we're making, there's going to be resistance, even if it's a good thing and we are motivated to do it. There will be resistance simply because we haven't built up those pathways in our brain. Even if the change we're making makes total sense and we see and understand all the benefits, the old way of doing those things, that pathway is still strong and it still wants to be fired. But when it comes down to it, I think a lot more people struggle on the other extreme of that commitment level, where they are too committed to changes. And then that makes no sense, but let me explain. One of the 6 human needs that we have is certainty. That manifests as predictability and control and familiarity and routine, which we gain by being committed to a certain lifestyle or being committed to certain habits, or our morning routine, for example. But we also have a human need, or the next one really, that follows after certainty in that stable environment is variety, which you can also call uncertainty. So we need a balance of both of them. And often when we become too committed to certain changes, well, let's just continue with the morning routine example. If I commit so hard to my new morning routine and I say, I'm going to stick with this every single morning without fail, rain or shine, vacation or not, for the next 10 years, or even let's just take it all the way out to the stream for the rest of my life, that can be kind of scary because one, I don't know if that's the best morning routine for me. I don't, it's not like it's the perfect one. I know it's probably not the perfect one. Even if it is perfect for me now in what I need to accomplish now, it's not going to stay that way forever. Hopefully I'm changing. Hopefully my environment is changing. And hopefully my needs are also changing. And so if we are too committed to that in the long term, it can be really scary because we don't know if that's actually going to be the best path for us. And maybe not scary is the best word, but we're not willing to give it our 100% day in and day out if we don't know for sure that it is going to be the best path for us. And we never will know that that's the best path for us. So whenever we overcommit to something that we aren't totally confident about, we're not going to be able to stay motivated to do it, both in the short term and the long term. If I'm going to eventually give up on this at some point, why should I stay motivated to do it now? And then with that, kind of on the flip side of that coin, is there's no more variety. There's nothing that is going to be changing about our morning routine. So all of a sudden, our morning routine becomes less desirable. It's desirable to a degree, or it's desirable to a degree because we have that consistency and our brain thrives with consistency, but our brain doesn't thrive with a lack of variety, with a lack of novelty and newness. So what do we do with that? What, are we just supposed to not ever commit to anything long term? No, I think what we need to do is, well, and it's not even just me thinking this. This is what the neuroscience and what the research shows, is that we need to be committed, but also flexible. And we need to have consistency, but also variety.
So what does that look like? How do you do both of those things?
So for me, I've made the commitment to always have a morning routine, but I give myself flexibility in what that morning routine is going to look like, both in the day-to-day, but also over the course of weeks and months. So what I do is I sit down and I create my morning routine, the things that I feel will be most helpful and most beneficial for my life right now. And then I commit to those things for 2 to 3 weeks. I say, I'm going to be 100% consistent and diligent with these things for 3 weeks. And it's not that I'm going to give up on my morning routine afterwards, But after 3 weeks, I'm going to sit down and reevaluate. Was this not working for me super well? Do I need to pull it out and put something else in there? Do I need to tweak this here, tweak that there? And often I end up not making that many changes. But because I've given myself these checkpoints where I have permission to change my consistency and my rigorous routine, it makes it easier for me to stay consistent and diligent with those things during those 3 weeks. Because I do value consistency and staying committed. I just don't want to do this exact same thing for, 50 years. But I can do 3 weeks. Even if it isn't the most ideal, fine-tuned routine for me, I can stay consistent for 3 weeks because I know that that's how I'll find out if it's not going to be the best for me or if it is the best for me. So I give myself this kind of test period of 2 to 3 weeks, and then I reevaluate. And then after that, I fine-tune and I tweak, and then I recommit for 3 weeks. Most of the time, stuff is staying the same. I might swap out, journal writing for reading a book, or instead of meditating in my room, the weather has changed, so now I go outside and I meditate outside. Or now it's snowing, so now instead of staying committed to my routine of always going outside to meditate, I meditate inside. Giving myself that freedom and flexibility to change and adapt not only makes it easier to stay committed long term, but it makes it easier to stay committed today because I know I'm not locked in and stuck for the rest of my life.
So I have a great desire to be consistent with my morning routine, but I find that it's really hard to protect that time. And I think a lot of people run into that, whether it's a mom with young children. For me, we work with people who are in different time zones. And so if I look at my phone, I may have a whole bunch of texts or messages or emails, someone who's on a different time zone that needs me to respond right away, and it seems very urgent. And so I find myself at 5 a.m. jumping into that before I've honored my morning routine. I'm getting better at protecting it, but do you have any tips for how to best protect something like a morning routine, something you want to be consistent with? It could be anything.
Yeah, I think at the core of this conversation is this idea of perfectionism, that consistency is only beneficial if you're consistent 100% of the time, which sounds true, but if I try to work out every day and I worked out 3 times because other stuff came up those other days, I still get the benefit of working out those 3 times. That Tuesday morning workout is still beneficial even if Wednesday morning workout doesn't happen, and even if Monday morning workout didn't happen. And so I think the answer to that perfectionism is a little bit of grace and understanding for yourself, but then also focusing on the individual benefit of these isolated circumstances. Yeah, stuff comes up. People are in town, or we had to take off early in the morning to go run an urgent errand. Just because that happened, that doesn't mean that tomorrow's opportunity is blown.
I think that goes back to our 3 powers that we've talked about previously, about what we're focusing on and the meaning that we give it. And I think that if I'm focusing on when I have been consistent and looking forward to more consistency and giving myself, like you said, grace and having gratitude for the opportunity, I think it's much easier to continue in what I desire to be consistent with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Having that grace and that patience and forgiveness, and then focusing on the benefit of all the times that it does work and that you are able to do it versus all the times you failed. It would be better if we worked out 5 days a week versus 2 or 3, but trying to be consistent is better than giving up on it altogether. And in terms of kind of getting thrown off by our schedule, or let's say we have guests come to visit in town and you don't want to just ignore them for the first 2 hours of the morning because you have your morning routine and you got to stick with it. I think that let's say it's a consistent change. Like for a while, I was going down to the valley. We live up in the mountains and it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive away from the Phoenix Valley. And I was going down pretty much every weekend, every other weekend. And I was really great about working out and meditating when I was at home and I had a consistent schedule. But then when I was going down to the valley and I was staying with friends or at Airbnb or camping, it's like, I can't work out. I just, was camping in my car last night and I don't have any gym equipment. Instead, I created kind of my on the go morning routine, or it could be your travel routine. So if you're staying at a hotel for work and you don't have access to your gym, or you can't go sit outside on your porch and watch the sunrise, or it's hard to go to bed early because you had work stuff going on till late, you can create a modified kind of simpler version of your routines or whatever it is that you're trying to be consistent with. And you can be consistent in the fact that you are doing something, even if what you're doing is different.
Looks a little different. I like that idea. And it goes back to planning and being prepared. I know for me, like, same thing. If I'm going to be traveling away from home, I can still do the core of my routine. It's just going to look different. And being accepting of those differences and letting go of perfectionism. I can only fit in 15 minutes of meditation because I have early morning meetings when I'm out of town or something. So yeah, those are some great ideas for working with that dissonance, overcoming that. And with the Batman principle, love that. I also like paying attention to our commitment. And are we committed and yet not overcommitted? Not so rigid that the idea of being consistent with what we've laid out is overwhelming and feels locked in without variety, and how that can cause us to want a way out, want to not have to be locked in forever into something. I love the idea of committing to 2 to 3 weeks, reevaluating, adding some variety. I think that makes it so much easier to stay consistent.
And I think that idea of setting up these like checkpoints where I'm going to stay committed for 2 to 3 weeks, reevaluate, adjust, recommit, it kind of goes in line with the Batman principle that I'm not the person that is great at doing these consistently, but I now am. Or I wasn't the type of person that was really consistent with these things or was good at doing these things, but I now am. And I don't even have to be that person forever going forward, because if I were to tell myself that, I am the person that does these things for the rest of my life, that is also, there's a little bit of kind of future dissonance with that. It's like, I don't think I'm going to be the person that works out every single day for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to get old and I'm not going to be able to do that. But having those shorter periods, that's why I called it the July Bryson. It's like, I'm going to just commit to these changes for a month. And then after July, I'm going to sit down and reevaluate. And by that point, I had just become that person and I was able to shift into August Bryson and what August Bryson wanted to do and achieve. But having those shorter periods was huge. It's like we are circadian beings. We operate with continuous and constant resets. Every day is a new reset for us. Every week is another reset, and we have a month, we have a year. We have all these checkpoints that we can use as a reset, and they just naturally operate as these bookends for what is this month about, or what is this week about? What needs to happen between now and then? What is going to be different? And it's a very natural way of thinking, and so we can capitalize on that to make these changes using both the Batman principle as well as using the Batman principle to avoid that dissonance, but then also implementing those shorter periods of commitment so that we are able to be very committed without being overcommitted and feeling locked in.
When we decide we want to be consistent with exercise, that shorter commitment period, we can be that person who exercises every day, but what that exercise looks like can change every 2 to 3 weeks. It can change from in your 20s to in your 70s, but you can still be that person that exercises every week. And I like the idea of putting variety in there and having a renewing of the commitment and keeping it fresh and more engaging and more exciting.
Well, we'd love to hear what you guys have to think about today's episode. Let us know if you guys try this out. Put your experience in the comments, or feel free to message us on social media platforms. We'd love to hear your experience with it and how it worked for you. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Live Free podcast. Subscribe to never miss out on new episodes and follow us on Instagram at livefree_neurowellness.